it all, but knowing Portland, working in Portland, a typical house, a building, not even commercial, could cost 150 easily, 100,000 for site plan, getting permissions and all that paperwork. And these guys are doing 3 campuses for a lot less than that. And yes, they will be getting paid later on for the remaining, but they're counting on their work, and they're counting on us, and he's counting on himself being a key president
Right.
and doing this juster.
And just want to add one other thing, just to make everybody feel comfortable with something that feels almost too good to be true, is that, you know, they weren't the only people that were interviewed.
No, there were
They were
six,
one of
six or so.
six firms, so we picked the best, not knowing at all that this would ever be a possible result, so. Kim?
I think this is the first piece of good news we've had this budget season. I mean, they've been great to work with in the meetings that I've been at, and I think just the compassion and generosity of this offer is tremendous. And I mean, I think it's a, for us, it's a can't lose situation that I feel like we have to take on. So, excited.
May I just add a little bit? I know I already spoke. Going this far doesn't commit us to any certain parts of the project. And
No.
I think that needs to be reiterated. It doesn't, there may be things that are found that are even more important, and so other things get moved off, or there are things that didn't seem that important, and whatever. It just commits to this deep level of study.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
That's right. Nothing's in right now. Though I would say honestly, I don't think anybody has there's no debate about the issues around safety in the schools. And there's no debate about the cafeteria. There's no debate about the wiring. I mean, there's a lot of things on this list that really, they'll be on the final list, but there are things that are on this list that will deserve a conversation, right? And there'll be things we don't even know about that will be added, right? But it's not a done deal, yeah.
John?
So just a quick update on the numbers. If you make the cuts that you talked about on that list
Mhm.
and add in the architects, our budget change is about 3.06%. Which is in line with what we've been historically.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna share a comment one of my sons made today, or yesterday when I was picking him up. He said, you know, our front entrance, it's such a farce, for the high school, it's such a farce. It looks good right there, but when you go in the rest of the building, it's falling apart, it looks awful, it looks like trash. I'm like, okay. So, anyway, I just thought I'd share that little anecdote, but. All right, so I think this might be a good time to allow anybody from the public to speak, if they care to.
Bill Gross from 7 Seaview Avenue. I've got 2 points to talk about. Since you're bringing up the CIP, I just want to remind you that for some of you that weren't here back then, I remember when Michael Moore was the financial chairman of the school board back in 2013. He and I had a lot of arguments about that capital improvement program. But the program was a 10-year program with $11.7 million to be spent. And almost all of that $11 million was to be paid for because we had 3 bonds that had come, we had finished paying off back then. And there was a savings of between $800,000 per year and $900,000 per year in savings of debt service that we were going to have forever and ever as long as we didn't borrow any more money. And that plan that was to spend $11.7 million over 10 years. And what appears to be happening, if from the numbers you're talking about now, it appears that, I know every year the school board was supposed to spend $950,000 a year on capital improvements. And from what you've just said, it sounds like this school board and last year's school board and the school board before it did not spend $950,000 in capital improvement costs. Instead, it would appear that the school board has been taking money that it had in the budget because of the debt service had dropped by $800,000. We're taking that money and actually moving it over to operating costs. So if you're dissatisfied with the amount of capital improvements that money's been spent over the last 4 years, it's because the school board has been taking money away from the capital improvement programs, which 4 years ago, the school board then said would pay for that $11.7 million with the savings from the debt service. And it looks like the school boards for the last couple of years have been taking that money and spending it on operating budget in order to not make the cuts that had to be made in order to not have a big tax increase. The second point I want to add is I went through the budget this year, and I'm looking at a couple of things. I'm looking at the number of professional staff and the number of student enrollment. Now, I'm only looking at this because of the size of the tax increase. But I'm looking back from the budget for the year 1999 to 2000. We had 143 professional staff, and then I'm looking for this year's budget, where we have about 163 professional staff. Now, if you take the ratio of the students that were enrolled back then to the number of students we have now, back in 1999, 2000, for every one of those professional staff, we had 12.13 students. Now, this year's budget, for each one of the 163 professional staffs, they're only serving 9.64 students. So the numbers of professional staff have gone up, the enrollment's gone down, and as a result, there's been a 20% decrease in how many students each professional staff serves. Now, you also have to remember, but of those 163 professional staff we have now, only 80 of them are essentially the core teachers who teach our children the basic subjects. If you look at the number of the number of teachers in Pond Cove, and the number of teachers, there are 29 classroom teachers in Pond Cove. There are 25 classroom teachers in middle school. And there are 26 classroom teachers in high school who are teaching the 4 core subjects, the social studies, science, math, and English. So we have 163 professional staff, and we have 80 of the professional staff perform almost all of the instruction and the education in the basic core knowledge that our students are getting. Now, I'm only bringing this up because I think if we're looking at not making big cuts to the budget to reduce the property tax increase, people are going to ask why has this ratio gone down so much? Now, my kids graduated. One of my kids graduated from here in 1999 and another in 2003. I know what the Cape schools were like then, and they were terrific. And Cape schools are terrific now, and I know it because I'm in the high school 3 or 4 days a week as a volunteer physics tutor. And the school system we have now is terrific. The school system we had when my kids graduated was terrific. It isn't that much better now than it was when my kids. I actually think my kids may have gotten a better education in 1999 and 2002. And yet, we've got this, what I would consider an enormous increase. If we kept the same ratio of professional staff to students this year that we had in 1999 when my son graduated, then we would have 33 and a half fewer professional staff. That's like $2 million in expenses. Now, I'm obviously not saying we're not going to make a cut like that, but if you come to the public and propose a gigantic property tax increase and say, there's no possible way you can cut any staff, and someone just takes a look at the numbers like this, it just doesn't seem to make sense. So I just think you should at least take a little historical perspective when you're thinking of what your counter arguments are going to have to be to taxpayers who are really going to be shocked by the property tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Cross. I am a special ed teacher at, well, K-12, I guess, but primarily at the high school and elementary school. I guess I've heard some questions from the board around that reduction of a teacher, well, not reduction, but putting that teacher, you had questions around the literacy part, but not questions about how that's going to impact special education. To me, I think that's really important. I think that, you know, I am the person in that position, but I think that position was created to allow teachers more time to provide that direct instruction. I think the question should be like, what does this impact? How is this impacting? How is this going to impact the special ed teachers? And I think there's lots of IEP meetings, paperwork, and those types of things that by reducing that will have a great negative impact on our students, our most needy students in special education. So I don't know if that was clear when they talked about how that might transition there, but I think it's important that you guys think about the special ed department and how that looks, so.
Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so we got to put our heads together. I think what I'm hearing very clearly tonight is that the latest figure from the engineers and architects is impossible almost to pass up.
So add that to the budget.
Yeah. Does anybody feel differently about that?
Okay.
And then, in terms of the other list that you provided us tonight, I believe everybody, it sounds like, is in agreement with the new custodian addition.
Mhm.
So from there, it leaves reductions. Elizabeth?
I just want to add that historically, the school board isn't in the habit of going line by line, and
Uh-huh.
so my understanding would be that we either accept a package or reject a package and give a number as opposed to line by line. I'd just like to throw that out there. Since you pulled the custodian out, it was part of a package.
Yeah, no, I just thought Howard said something earlier about breaking it up, so I just thought I'd go with the clearest parts. Howard, would you like us to talk about it as a package, or?
Please.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
And the one thing that seemed to get several questions was around the ELL teacher position. If you all feel that you would like to see that job remain full-time, what you just need to understand, it would be a split assignment. I think we really are convinced it's not a full-time job, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with split assignment, but I would find something else to put in its place, and I'd bring it to you Tuesday evening.
So what I'm curious about that, if we made ELL full-time, would the other half amount of that time for that person go towards the Pond Cove teacher, helping special ed in that position at all, or no?
I think that what we would do is that whoever is hired for that job, I hate to say right now that it would be ELL/math or ELL/, I don't know. I mean, I think that depending on the credentials and the training, that we would use them in a creative way to benefit the students and help the teachers in whatever way we could. But we'd explain that it's a split assignment and
Okay.
see what their expertise is.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that pose a risk to budget for a full-time position, knowing that half of it is just ELL and saying, okay, well, the other half will fill in wherever. And maybe there's not a need, or we can't find somebody with a skill
Yeah.
to teach a ninth grade Spanish class or something wonderful like that, just
Right.
saying.
Well, right, right.
Anyway,
I mean,
trying to bring a little lightness.
I think
to the
that, I
mood,
think that it's odd. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks as if we're just trying to find
Right.
ways to round up. And,
So my opinion is that we go with the part-time, and I think, for me, the conversation is clarification, not conversation to say, I want that, but understanding it. So I am in favor of not trying to make it happen.
Right.
But it sounds like the need is for a half-time
Right.
position. So
Yep.
that's where I land.
I really was just gonna say what Heather just said, which was, there were questions, but I felt, especially mine, was just clarifying, especially for the public, that
Yep.
halftime is adequate for 8 students.
yep, it is.
Not that there was a wish, and it felt like that's what those
Right,
questions were.
Right,
not-
good, okay, good. So then I guess I'll bring this proposal back to you, this package. I mean, I don't think you need to vote on this list. You're gonna vote on a dollar amount, but you would just know that this is the way that we're headed.
Okay.
Yeah, good, okay.
Does anybody feel like maybe addressing some misconceptions around how we staff and not being strict ratios? Because I hate for that to hang out there after.
Or do you want me
I
to
think
take
if you
to
can,
take a
that'd be
run at it?
great.
So maybe I'll try my best to speak and kind of the various points that were all made, and very good points. Regarding the CIP account, my understanding is that for some number of years, it evolved to where there was about $1 million a year in the CIP. When money was, when a bond was retired, as I understand it, the money that would have gone to pay the bond was moved over to the school CIP account. And for a couple of years there, I don't know how many, you're thinking maybe 3?
3 bonds expired over.
Okay,
4 years.
so there was about $1 million a year, and that was true all the way up to last year. There wasn't a lot, that was $1 million was in that budget for CIP last year, not the current year. Last year, for the first time, that budget was cut by $500,000 in order to lower the tax rate. You're quite right, that's what that was. It wasn't, I'll just say that, it was absolutely a way to lower the tax rate. And the thing I would say, though, about the plan of, I would never recommend continuing with that practice long-term, because a lot of things that need to be done, it takes more than $1 million a year to get them done. And to piecemeal a job that is great as we have here for our buildings, it would mean a variety of architects, a variety of contractors, a variety of different people, all of them not holding themselves accountable because they just did one part of it, where if you do the whole thing at once, there's an efficiency of economy on that, and there's accountability that you don't get by pushing that out. Plus, some jobs can't be done for $1 million, they may be a $5 million job, you just can't do it, you get my point. So, I don't know what the right number is for an ongoing CIP account for the school. I think there's a math formula for that. There are ways to say what should be the CIP for X number of square feet of school, and I think I'll tell you what that is. And I don't know what it is, so it may be $1 million. I just don't know. But I just want to be clear that, as far as I know, it's only been recently that number was lowered. And the money that was being spent, I think a lot of it was being spent on roof projects, which was valuable and important, but there's a lot more to do than the roofs. And that's where you get into major projects. So regarding the point you make, which is again valid, about what's up with, you know, the enrollment creeping up and up and up. I mean, not the enrollment, but the staffing, when enrollment seems to be flat, or maybe even dropping over those years. I know that the job, I mean, it actually makes me want to do this, to figure out historically, each year, what jobs were added. I think we actually could figure that out. But I know that ones that I'm aware of, like one of them was the extended learning opportunity job and the volunteer job. That was one that was created a few years ago, and I think that it had never been here before. It was the idea of having students have an opportunity to create different unique ways to learn and to earn credit. And it was a way to promote getting volunteers in our schools and enriching what our teachers offer. I mean, this is an example. We added last year a behavioral specialist, and that was based on a number of our teachers and some administrators saying, we need professional help with that. And so that it was responsive to our teachers saying, we're at a point now, we have so many children that have these unique challenges, we need help with how to work with them effectively and their families, and so there's one example. I mean, I think that a lot of the things that have happened have been responsive to the changing needs in our school. And I think that you're right about the class size being so small at elementary and not so small at middle and high, but I think that that's textbook perfect. I mean, that's what people say we should do. We should have the smallest teacher-student ratio at primary, and as children get older and more independent, we have larger class sizes. That's probably, someone would say, I'm gonna say, that's not a bad idea. So I don't know how we got, and I don't know what those positions are that total the 20 or 30 you mentioned, but I think we're gonna try and figure out what that is. It's a fair question. Yeah.
I would just like to add to that a little bit in that education now from when your sons were in school has definitely changed to have, in that we have to have more services because there are more needs have been identified over the past 20 years. And so it's not just because we're figuring out, oh, certain kids need certain services. It's throughout the state as well. We're mandated to provide these services. So it's not just up to the district. So.
Oh, you know what I just thought about?
What?
You went to all-day kindergarten. When you did that had to be a year where there were at least 4 or 5 additional teachers, I would think.
3.
Just 3? Okay.
We doubled.
Okay, so that would be maybe part of it. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I also think in 20 years, life has gotten much more complicated for these teenagers and youth growing up with the internet and social media. And it's all in our conversations about safety and security around the school. And it's one of the reasons that we are so adamant about getting a social worker brought into the school. It is education now, and responsibility of education is so far beyond the Common Core classes to help raise a well-rounded, emotionally stable and healthy and vibrant, intellectually stimulated child. And I think to just focus on the 4 Common Core classes, which I don't even agree with the idea of just 4 Common Core classes, but to just comment on that, I think is very, very, very short-sighted.
So I'd just like to add in, we talked about this extensively when we went through each of the schools' budget of how do you staff your schools, and it's much more than just a classroom instructor in terms of what is effective in learning. And we're trying to follow what is best practice to what is effective in learning. And a lot of that has to do with things that are beyond what's in that classroom. It has to do with making sure that kids are ready to learn, making sure that, that you're really taking care of what allows them to be there and present. And those are the things that you see additions in special ed staff, you see additions in guidance staff, you see additions in technological staff. That's where the growth in professional staff has predominantly been. I'm not sure, the big change in teacher staffing happened, looked like around 2003, 2004, in terms of, there was an increase at that point in time, and it's been relatively steady since then. But in terms of how we staff and what the diversity of staff, we spent quite a bit of time discussing and explaining how we staff and what the educational benefit of that diverse staffing is.
I have a question though. If what you're saying is true, then I'm in a kind of a unique position. I know what my son and daughter learned in physics. They both had Dr. Efron in physics. And back then, of course, physics was it was taught in 11th and 12th grade. And the physics is taught, I understand what you're saying, all these associated services that support education are necessary or either mandated or we think that they're best practices and want to do it. But I'm making a direct comparison between what my son learned in physics in 1998, 99. He took physics from Dr. Efron, he took advanced physics from Dr. Efron. He didn't have AP back then. And then I'm seeing Dr. Efron teach physics now. The physics that Dr. Efron is teaching now is not any better than the physics he taught my son in 1999. And all of those associated services you're talking about, sir, we have them nowadays, but they have not improved the physics education in Dr. Efron's classroom by one iota. And the same thing's true for math. The mathematics that my son took in 1999 are just as good as the math classes that the students I see right here in the high school are taking, and their math, the level of math knowledge they have is no better than the level of math knowledge my son has. So I think what you're saying certainly is partially true. Certainly there are best practices now that require more support staff. But if we look at the type of things that I can make a direct comparison from what I'm seeing in high school, in the math skill level and the physics skill level of the students in 2017 in Cape, and what I know my son had in 1999, there's no improvement at all. Even though I will grant you there are non-academic benefits for all of the associated services you give, but to try and convince me that all of these extra either mandated or best practice associated support services are having an effect on the quality of the education we have, it's really hard for me to agree with that.
So if I may for a minute, the change is not in the instruction, the change is in the receptivity of the entire student body to that instruction. So, because that's what's got to be effective.
Heather?
So I appreciate all that you say, and I agree that the instruction, it's Mr. Efron, Dr. Efron teaching the same thing, but you yourself have mentioned that you've been in the classroom 3 times a week for many, many years, and I'm sure you contribute a tremendous amount helping students that are struggling. And we are very grateful. I think the board acknowledged earlier this year, or maybe in the fall, the volunteerism that you have done. But unfortunately, there are not enough community members to help support the students. And so we have to hire people to enhance. It's the same work that you're doing, are these other positions helping to support students. And I would hope that you would agree that your work is valuable and contributes a tremendous amount. And that's the exact same thing that we're talking about when we're talking about these other services. It's the same thing that you're doing. So it goes well beyond the core curriculum teachers. There's more support needed. And if you look at your own position, we're very grateful for it. And so thank you for what you do.
And I would just also add one more thing, in addition to this, how students' needs have shifted over the years or evolved over the years. Also, the perspective of education has widened. So it used to be that people, you know, educators focused on very, you know, typical courses, and all the rest was not in their purview. But time has taught us how important the whole child and caring for the whole child, how important that is. And it's our duty, I think, as educators to make sure we're supporting and teaching all aspects of, you know, living.
Also Jessica.
Jessica?
So I'll speak to that, because I was in high school in 1998, and so special education were in separate classrooms. They weren't required to be in a regular education curriculum. So it's the responsibilities of regular education and special education teachers and staff to make sure kids can access the curriculum. They can't be served in isolation anymore, and it's not just reading, writing, math, social studies. We're now teaching kids, we're required to teach kids organizational skills. You know, we have 8 units that we're responsible, 8 common core areas, not just 4. So I think the parameters of what we're supposed to be providing, just as a baseline, have completely changed. And just an understanding maybe of, just to get a kid with that needs support up to the point where they can even sit in the classroom. I mean, that costs a lot of money. So I just don't want you to think that not everyone starts out the same way. And education for special education has changed significantly since 1999, you know, the example that you use. I mean, I used to spend 2 periods a day in a self-contained room working with kids that are in classrooms now. And I think that people do a really good job to make sure that everyone's included, and that absolutely costs money and services. So I appreciate where you're coming from. But just know that I don't think that part of it is being wasteful, and that staff does have to account for that total budget number.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Bill, because if they don't come from you, those questions are gonna come from someone else. So I appreciate the dry run. Thank you. All right, so are we all set for the evening, or?
I am.
Yeah? Good.
We could stay till 9.
Okay.
John, did you want